Kubo's official fan club, KlubOutside, has over 704 questions that he has answered from fans. If you're a member of KlubOutside, then you have the option to ask Kubo whatever you want, and each week he selects 3 questions from a list of submissions which he answers. Most of these questions reveal unanswered details about the Bleach lore and its characters. There are some really pointless questions, but there are some really interesting ones that he has answered. In this video series, I select the most interesting questions and break them down. In this video, we'll be covering fascinating new information about the relationship between Ukitake and Aizen, all new secret details about Genichimaru's Bankai, as well as how Kubo had come up with the name Bankai, and definitely stick around until the very end of the video because I'll be talking about why Aizen may be afraid of Unohana. So without further delay, let's begin the second video covering this huge library of questions which Kubo has answered on his official fan club. We got really tired of the same old boring anime shirts, so we decided to launch Getsuga.com with the aim of creating designs inspired by our favorite anime and manga. We came up with designs that look cool and represent all of our favorite stories. Check out the latest Instinct collection, which features some amazing designs like this Frosted Heavens design inspired by Toshiro Hitsugaya, or this Instinct design inspired by Holo Ichigo, and my personal favorite, which is the Heart design, which was inspired by Ukiura Shifa. Do not miss out, go to Getsuga.com and wear your favorite stories. The translations for these questions that I'll be discussing have been provided by Reiko Run on Tumblr, as I think that they do the best job at accurately translating the content from KlubOutside. So the first question that we'll be talking about is question 158, and this is in reference to a conversation between Ukitake and Aizen, as this foreshadows Ukitake's sacrifice in the 1000-Year Blood War arc. The fan's question is in reference to what Aizen had said in chapter 178, that from the very start no one has stood upon the heavens, and while he was looking at Ukitake he had said, "Not you, not I, not even the gods." The fan asks, was this you, hinting at the connection between Ukitake and the Soul King? Kubo responds that this is correct, which means that Aizen had prior knowledge that Mimihagi was within the body of Ukitake. We know from the 1000-Year Blood War arc recently during that 10-minute flashback sequence that Ukitake had told Shunsui about the circumstances of his childhood, how his parents had prayed at the shrine of Mimihagi, pleading with the deity to save their son's life. Mimihagi didn't cure Ukitake's ailment, but instead had stopped its progress. This thematically ties into the fact that Mimihagi governs over stillness. There are so many things that Aizen had known about the history of the Soul Society. He had known about the nature of the Soul King, and from chapter 178 it's evident that he was aware that Ukitake was the host of the right arm of the Soul King, Mimihagi. When Aizen along with Tozen and Gin are ascending to Hueco Mundo, Ukitake questions whether he has joined forces with the Menos, as he wonders why. Aizen tells Ukitake that his motive is to seek greater heights. He then questions how far has he fallen, as Aizen tells him not to kid himself. No one has ever stood on top of the heavens before, not you as he refers to Ukitake, or I, or even the gods. Aizen states that there is an unbearable vacancy on the throne of heaven and it ends now, as he states that he will now stand at the top. Keeping this in mind, if you look at what Ukitake had said in chapter 616, you can really appreciate the level of foreshadowing that Kubo incorporates into Bleach, as Ukitake states that he will take the place of the Soul King. This of course is after the Soul King is cut in half by Ichigo and the 3 worlds begin to destabilize. Ukitake chants to Mimihagi, revealing that this god is said to be the right arm of the Soul King, which had fallen from the heavens long ago. Ukitake had used a special ritual called Kamikake so that he could offer up all of his organs to Mimihagi, so that he could become the actual right arm of the Soul King itself. Ukitake sacrifices his life for the sake of the Gotei 13. Ukitake states that he has been thinking about this very moment from the day that he had found out how he had survived. Ukitake was aware that one day he would have to make a sacrifice on this scale, and it appears as though Aizen was aware of the threat that Ukitake had posed. I mean, considering the fact that Aizen had wanted to create an Oken and enter into the royal palace, if he was able to successfully defeat the Zero Division version, and then if he was able to destroy the Soul King, then similar to how Ukitake had sacrificed himself in the 1000-year Blood War arc, then he too would have sacrificed himself and released Mimihagi in order to stop Aizen. It is crazy how this one throwaway line from Aizen in chapter 178 foreshadows events that take place in chapter 616. Either way, this just means that Aizen had already accounted for the threat that Mimihagi would pose. I would love to know more details about Aizen's backstory, how he had come to learn about the nature of the Soul King, and also how he found out that a body part of the Soul King is within Ukitake. Following this, we have a question in relation to Genichimaru's Bankai Kamishini no Yari. This is from question 545, where a fan asks that Gin's Bankai has the ability to leave a piece of the sword within the body of his opponent. Then this small sword fragment releases a poison within the body which breaks down the cells, as the fan wonders whether if this piece of the sword is permanently lost in this process. Now this question is all linked back to when Mayuri had stated that when a Bankai is damaged, then that damage is usually permanent. He had given the example of Hihio Zabimaru and how the fragments of his Bankai which were damaged against Byakuya in the Soul Society arc are still damaged even to this day during the 1000-year Blood War arc. The only Bankai which is an exception to this rule appears to be Komamura's Bankai Kokujo Tengen Myo, since the avatar and Komamura's body are so intricately linked. The fan was wondering, well, if every time Gin uses his Bankai and he loses a sword fragment, then will it mean that his Zanpakuto will be reduced to nothing but a handle and a hilt if he continues to use this ability? Kubo answers that the part of Gin's sword which is inside of his opponent's body is made up of poison, and since the poison is a secretion of the sword, it will return to its original state after a certain amount of time. So it seems like similar to the venom sacs of a snake, once the venom is released via a bite, it will take time for the venom snacks to replenish their stores. So in a similar way, once Gin's Bankai releases that sword fragment which is the poison, it takes time for that sword fragment to restore. A lot of this confusion comes to details that we learn about in chapter 515, when Mayuri told Ichigo that when a Bankai is destroyed, it can never be returned to what it once was. If you think about Genichimaru's Bankai, his Zanpakuto shape does not change when he activates it. Kamishini no Yari allows him to extend his sword up to 13 kilometers and at 500 times the speed of sound, thus making it the fastest Zanpakuto. Now, the true nature or ability of Gin's Bankai was concealed by him, and this is his Bankai's ability called Korosei Kamishini no Yari. This ability has nothing to do with speed or length, as he is able to transform his sword into dust or particles for a moment when it expands and contracts. And this is where the deadly poison contained within his Zanpakuto dissolves into the body of his opponent and breaks down their cells. His Bankai ability is very formidable, as it's essentially an instant hit kill, a deadly poison which is linked to the fastest sword in the series. This was so powerful that even Aizen fused with the Hokyoku was caught off guard by it. If it wasn't for the Hokyoku, then Aizen would have completely broken down to a cellular level and dissolved from the inside out. But yeah, this information revealed from Kubo's fan club in question 545 does a great job of explaining how Gin's Bankai works. So it's not the fact that his actual sword is being damaged here, it's the fact that that poison that is released is a byproduct of his Bankai, similar to how Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo is a giant baby, which is a byproduct of Mayuri's Bankai. So even if that baby is destroyed or anything happens to it, Mayuri can release another one when he activates his Bankai. Or like how the ice structures that form on Hitsugaya's body when he activates his Bankai are destroyed, he is able to regenerate them because again they are a byproduct of his Bankai. Renji's Zanpakuto literally had transformed into those skeletal segments of a snake, and it was those that were destroyed by Byakuya, which means that Renji's sword itself was destroyed, which is why it was permanently damaged during that battle. The following question is from just a week ago, and it's question 701, and the fan had asked that when Hitsugaya and Aizen had faced off at the Central 46 compound, Aizen had defeated Hitsugaya, but he didn't attack Unohana and Isane, as he instead had moved to Sokyoku Hill. The fan wonders whether if this is because Aizen had thought that he didn't have a chance of winning against Unohana. This of course is in reference to all of the new details that we learn about Unohana's character during the 1000-year Blood War arc. Kubo's answer reveals that he doesn't believe that Aizen had thought that he couldn't win, but it was certain that engaging in a battle with Unohana would have caused him to expend a lot of energy. So it seems like Aizen had decided not to waste any more stamina here at the Central 46 compound, especially if he still has to remove the Hokyoku from Rukia, as he has basically all of the Gote 13 there ready to stop him if they find out what he is doing. So it's not that he was, well, afraid of facing off against her, it was more so that he had avoided her in order not to waste time as well as energy. The Bleach character data book Souls actually does reveal some stats information for both Aizen and Unohana, and this is information which represents their characters during the Soul Society arc. So this gives us a bit of an idea as to how a fight between the two of them would have unfolded at this point in the story. So Aizen's attack power is actually scored at 100, and this is linked to the illusion-based abilities of his Kyoka Suigetsu, as well as his ability to utilize powerful Kido spells and his insane control over Reiatsu. Unohana also has a attack of 100, and while we don't know this during the Soul Society arc, but she was of course the first Kinpachi, which means that she is one of the greatest sword wielders in the history of the Soul Society. In terms of defense, Aizen does beat her here as he scores 90 on the stats, with his superior Kido allowing him to block and deflect moves effortlessly. Unohana on the other hand has 80 for her defense, as I'm assuming that most of her defense will be endurance based, as she can heal herself during battle instead of outright deflecting and blocking attacks like Aizen will be doing. In terms of intelligence, both of them are understandably ranked at 100, with Aizen's strategic mind and his ability to plan ahead and utilize his Kyoka Suigetsu for deception, and then it's Unohana's combat experience, also tied to her being one of the only people who had expressed doubt when she was examining the corpse of Aizen when he had faked his death during the Soul Society arc. This again is credited to her intelligence and her fantastic intuition. In terms of speed, Aizen does beat Unohana here as his speed scores at 90, while Unohana's speed ranks at 70. When it comes to the point of stamina, when we examine the two of these characters, this is where you understand Aizen's logic of avoiding Unohana outright, as her stamina ranks at 90, and this is again thanks to her healing abilities which boosts her endurance, and we had seen this during her training with Kinpachi. Aizen on the other hand has a stamina of 80, as he doesn't really have any proficiency with healing abilities, but despite this he still has very impressive stamina. So it wasn't that Aizen was unconfident in confronting Unohana, it was instead more of a tactical decision to avoid her, because of all of the reasons which I've already mentioned. So the final question that we'll be talking about is actually one of the first that Kubo had answered on his fan club, and it's question number 3, as the fan asks, could you give us some details around how you would come up with the word Bankai? So Kubo says that before Bleach was serialized, he had planned to use the word Bansatsu Fukuryuho in another manga that he was working on. So the word Bankai was repurposed from there. Kubo worked on several one-shot series before Bleach like Ultra Unholy Hearted Machine, Rune Master Urara, Bad Shield United, and even 1 year before Bleach was released, he was working on another serialized manga called Zombie Powder, which was cancelled after 4 manga volumes. I'm presuming that this term Bansatsu Fukuryuho was supposed to be used within Zombie Powder, but because the series didn't continue onwards, it instead ended up being the framework for the word Bankai. The entire concept of Bankai centers around externalizing and subjugating one Zanpakuto spirit. In order to achieve Shikai, a Shinigami needs to be dragged into the inner world of one Zanpakuto. A Bankai is attained by materializing a Zanpakuto in the outer world. During the Soul Society arc, we learned about how difficult it is to attain Bankai, as it usually takes multiple years to achieve the transformation and then 10 years in order to master one's Bankai. In the series, we have seen via Renji's Bankai that a Zanpakuto spirit may only half recognize its wielder, thus giving them a false version of their Bankai. Throughout the entirety of the series, Renji had referred to his Bankai as Hihio Zabimaru. This is because Zabimaru was not completely subjugated by Renji. While Ichibei gives him the true name of his Bankai, So-o Zabimaru, he tells him that it's up to him to get stronger so that he is worthy of wielding his true Bankai. In chapter 120, we learn that a Bankai is about 5 to 10 times stronger than a Shinigami's Shikai, and only the most strongest and gifted of Shinigami are able to attain Bankai. It is definitely a unique transformation. It also has an equally incredible name, one that has become incredibly iconic across all of the anime and manga fandom. So to wrap things up, that's the second video on the questions that Kubo has answered on KlubOutside. In this video, we've talked about question 158, which is about the connection between Ukitake and Aizen, question 545, which is about Genichimaru's Bankai, then you have the very recent question 701, which is about Aizen possibly confronting Unohana in the Soul Society arc, and the last one was question number 3, which is about the origins of the term Bankai. Hopefully this video has helped you to better understand several different details about Bleach which weren't explained within the manga. If there is anything that I haven't mentioned in relation to these questions, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. Definitely do subscribe to the channel, as I'll be dropping even more KlubOutside videos like this one, where you'll be able to learn all of the latest exclusive information which wasn't in the manga by Kubo himself. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.